Is your last name?
Jerry.
What
What are you getting in this?
This is what I learned.
Oh, no, Anastasia Nicholas. Isn't that?
I don't know, so I'm hearing
No worries. You're Mr. Galecki. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I'm good.
Before
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
This one.
All right. Okay,
Yeah. Take your time. We're trying to get my seat.
I hate being cold, and I'm cold.
I really appreciate it, because we got a little
I knew you
information, so thank you.
I wanted to choose the one
I did, I went to UCL and thank you, seriously.
Yes.
Oh, really?
It's certificate, because you're not here, so they're, that 5, 6 years young. I just call the kids.
No, I know they do, but thank you again.
Quick question.
And it used to park with pretty first, they had a lot of pride in this.
Oh, here on the other side, great divide. Well, thank you.
Let's talk to her with all this honesty. Yes.
I'm Anastasia, nice to meet you.
So let's do that. I don't know that
Thank you so much. Oh, it's your nice. I'm always so sorry I had some big story that you guys do, that you need to know or Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure, no, I get it. And if you want to do that, then just do it. Seriously, maybe just what she's doing. Honestly, my understanding is this is silly. I thought it was.
There was. And too much construction. And then they went off another area.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I gotta call.
This is the, whatever. No, okay. Sorry.
Not ready, we got a minute.
No, it's okay. Sorry, it's just paper. Sorry, I
I was watching the Army baseball game. They were playing in Philadelphia.
How'd it go?
I didn't watch the whole game.
Was it snowing on the ground?
No, it wasn't. But it was cold.
Okay, welcome to the South Russell Village Council meeting. Today is Monday, March 28th, 7 p.m. For those of you who are watching through YouTube, hello. For those of you who are on our Google network, hello. We'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Officers, please roll.
Porter,
Here. Here.
Ritter,
Here.
Campbell,
Here.
Cavanaugh, here.
Here.
We have minutes from the March 15th regular council meeting. Any changes or adjustments to the minutes? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move.
Moved by Kavanaugh, seconded by.
I'll second.
Seconded by Canton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are passed.
One abstain.
One abstained with four abstained. All right, we have one visitor in the audience. Would you like to address council? Okay.
Well, just to say hello.
Just tell us who you are.
My name is Anastasia Nicholas. I'm from the Chagrin Valley Times. I'm going to be covering South Russell from now on, so it's nice to meet you all. Thank you for having me.
Are you taking over for Joe?
For Megan was the last one before me. Joan still works there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Okay, we're now at the mayor's report. Four of us attended the OML workshop on Saturday. I'll let them talk all about it, what the state's doing and what we learned on Saturday. Did want to remind you that the state has begun having hearings on a 5-year plan to phase in 26.5% of the police and fire retirements. Right now, we pay 19.5% for the police and 24% for fire. It will go up to 26.5% over a 5-year period if it's passed. Just let you know that that's being considered. At your place, over the last week, I got the fire department's building fund donation information. There's an agreement, there's other things. So that'll go right to the finance department to take a look, to the finance committee, take a look at it and make a recommendation. Basically, they're asking for about $70,000 for their building fund. So that's, I'll let you get a chance to read that when you have some time. I'm meeting with the Chamber of Commerce tomorrow to discuss their ideas for concerts. They have 2 proposals. One of them is on Tuesday, July the 10th. This will be a repeat. This will be in Elton John Wannabe. And the other one is on Tuesday, August the 9th. It'll be the Chagrin Falls Studio Orchestra, and there may be a wine tasting with that. I will know more later, but we'll get that meeting tomorrow. I think there's a park meeting next Monday. Yes, talk to the park committee about that. Western Reserve Land Conservancy is sponsoring a Zoom meeting concerning outdoor lighting. It'll be on Tuesday, 5th at 6:30. Basically, they're looking at commercial lights and other types of lighting, and having the angle is for the birds, try to protect the birds.
Is this like a light pollution kind of thing?
Yes, I think that's where they're going to be headed. NOACA's has a climate action pledge. I'll send that also off to the property committee. Also, on Wednesday, April the 13th, Grace Bellucci from NOACA will be at the Geauga County Township Association. These are dinners they have every quarterly. I know that Ruth and I are planning to go. It's just an interesting chance to see the other leaders of the county, and it's a good chance to hear what she's going to have to say. I think it just helps us to be in front of her, because eventually we're going to try to get in front of her for Bella Release. All right, in your packet, there's an email exchange with the resident who wants to hold a ceremony at our cemetery Sunday at 3 o'clock. Now, I hope you've had a chance to read the email chain. And solicitor, from what I pick up, this is against our regulations. So if we wanted to do anything, we'd have to do a motion to allow an exception.
So there are exceptions actually spelled out in the rules and regulations for special hardship or some sort of special circumstance. So yes, it would have to be some sort of motion to find if this is a special circumstance or a hardship.
Okay, we want to discuss this now.
Sure. Yeah. I read the email exchange. It sounds like a man's wife died at the age of 35 and took an old burial for her this coming Sunday, April 3rd, I think it is. And rules and regulations specify Monday through Friday and maybe Saturday. They do not allow expressly a burial on Sunday. And I suppose my question for the mayor, for the fiscal officer perhaps, is whether or not the husband is willing to pay the cost of overtime for street department personnel who might attend on a volunteer basis, I think, and do it in that way. But I think he'd also said to pencil them in for April 2nd, which is a Saturday.
There was correspondence back and forth between the administrative assistant and him. We still today have no forms, no paperwork, no payment, no anything. He wants to do it Sunday. I don't think 3 o'clock was set. We don't have a time. He just goes on Sunday afternoon. Or then week after he submitted his initial request, he said he could do it Saturday during normal hours. So, and I did figure out, so 2 workers for, their payroll and their PRS, so the overtime would be $395.
I spoke with a gentleman, this afternoon, and he is going to pay whatever he needs to pay. And he would like to have the burial on Sunday.
At what time did you?
3 o'clock.
What if we,
Is this something that the streets department can accommodate?
Yes, I spoke with Jakes, yes, they can.
Danielle, what do we do for a Saturday, just for curiosity?
Saturday is an extra, $100. Yeah, so weekday burial regular time is $350, and Saturday, if they do it late afternoon or they do it Saturday, that's, $450, so it's an extra 100. But he's willing to compensate the village for whatever the overage is. He was more than
Okay, so what's the cost? If we did it on Saturday, what would the cost be?
$450.
$450. On Sunday, the cost is?
Well, that's the cost that we charge them. I mean, $395 is just for the, labor. Our guys cut overtime, that's not the supplies or.
So that's $395 plus $450?
$350.
$450 is a Saturday, that charges an extra, it's $100 over what we would normally charge. So,
So on a Friday, it'd be $350.
mhm.
Friday, it'd be $350. Saturday is $450. Sunday is how much?
Well, this is just, when I figure out the Sunday, I'm only giving you what the payroll actually is, it's not
It should be $450 plus
$395.
the labor costs.
So it's $850, just call it round numbers.
Okay, let's just, good.
$445, or $845.
$845, yeah.
Let's give the guy a
Okay,
firm price.
okay.
The whole
I
reason,
like rounding up, by the way.
the whole reason for the Sunday was because that's when the family could attend, that he wasn't being difficult, that's when the bulk of the family could attend. So I hope we can accommodate him.
I am intrigued by his comment though that said, and if I can't do it Sunday, Saturday's fine. That's where the logic train kind of broke for me.
Well, it didn't break me, it's a terrible situation, I want to accommodate the poor gentleman, he's very young children, so, and grieving parents are the out.
Okay,
Would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion, that we, that we utilize Sundays as needed for the funerals. And I
For all
Can I be
funerals,
more
or just this
specific?
one?
I would rather move that we permit this exception for the, what's the name of the gentleman?
Yeah, Daniel Reynolds.
For Daniel Reynolds to conduct the funeral and burial service for his wife this coming April 3rd, 2022, provided he pays the cost of $845 to the village for labor and services on that Sunday, as well as the purchase of the burial plot in advance of the ceremony. Meaning he has to pay the burial plot and the $845, not later than,
Usually prior to 2 weeks, no, so by Friday, the latest.
close of business Friday, April 1st, 2022. So moved.
Moved and seconded.
I'll second it, that's at 3 p.m.
Discussion.
May I have the amendment that, and any necessary paperwork,
Sure.
any necessary documentation has to be submitted as well.
I would hope. Okay, we've had, been moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Now, if I may, will the hall be in contact with him?
Yeah, we contact
Mayor, I might add just as a note, in dealing with cemetery issues, that I did have to just do a family burial out in Hudson, and was told that the burial could start no later than 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The service at the graveside, no later than 1 o'clock, because the workers only stayed until 3:30, and they would not accommodate beyond 3:30. It's something,
Well, that's why we do have an extra fee, like during the week,
if it's a late,
if they come in after 3, they pay extra.
okay, well, as long as we're covering our costs.
Was that a weekday?
It was a weekday, yeah. So we had to just back our schedule up and make sure we made it there by 1 o'clock.
You know, I think this is something you should probably put on the property committee, take a look at it, you know, we've had this exception now. Let's see what we're doing.
Okay, now, how long have we had this?
Since 2015.
Okay, has this ever come up before, Sunday burial?
I would say Saturdays are the traditional.
Weekdays usually, and then some Saturdays.
Mr. Reynolds did make a point about the lack of clarity in some of the language about weekends.
But we did clean that up, that was on the price list, what council adopted was the rules and regs, and on the rules and regs, it does say Saturday.
Mr. Reynolds is a partner in the law firm.
So, but we did change the
Usually try to go all
price.
the way around this, give them-
So listen, you did mention, we do have the flexibility with the ordinance.
So,
Some,
which ordinance, I apologize.
well, the burial on Sundays.
So the rules and regs, yes, now here is one question that you just might want to consider, since it is now going to be on properties committee, is that you do mention in your rules and regs a cemetery committee. And I understand that we do not have a cemetery committee, so that is another thing that should definitely be addressed when you're looking at the rules and regulations.
So we need to create cemetery.
Well, I don't know if we want to.
Or just take it over with practice?
Yeah, just
Right.
change the language to reflect property committee instead of cemetery committee.
Isn't the issue there with the cemetery committee that maybe you're not, well, didn't Chagrin have a situation where the cemetery committee just like dictated down?
It's the difference between the cemetery board and the cemetery committee, so when we had the cemetery on Bell Road only, we had a cemetery board, and the board is, they're their own body, they can put it on the ballot, they can do what they want. So when we, the village formed the cemetery committee, when we were thinking of building the cemetery, and then that's the committee, because they always have to go to council for permission for everything. And then once the cemetery was opened, that responsibility got moved to the properties committee, and they just council disbanded the cemetery.
I recall deliberately not creating a cemetery board.
We disbanded
that
that
reason.
board, right, exactly.
And that makes sense, I'm just thinking, if you are going to be looking at the rules and regulations, and all, maybe updating them or revising them, just definitely consider that revision as well.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on the cemetery, this service this weekend? Last thing, I don't want you to feel the pressure, but 25% of the year is gone already. So, questions of the mayor? You're now the fiscal officer.
Actually, I do have a question,
Yes,
Mayor.
okay.
So those concert dates, 7, 10, and 8, 9, are they, is Chamber of Commerce asking to come out here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And will they have, they'll still have them down Triangle Park as well?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, they do 17 shows, and I think you do 8 of them, non-Tuesdays, they move them around.
Have
And
we,
they have like 9 down south.
have we had them there before?
They were here, yes, in fact, that's one of the reasons they're gonna meet tomorrow, is we had Elton John, the Elton John impersonator last year, and he was very good, but frankly, by 8:30, the crowd was thinning out, it gets cold.
Mhm.
Previous years, we were frozen, so I'm gonna talk to her about, maybe 8:30 is plenty,
Parking wasn't an issue?
we always find a way to park them in there.
Okay, okay, sounds good.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. Okay, fiscal officer, you have the floor.
Okay, I just submitted my report, I don't know if you have any questions. I have a list of add-ons as of today. So, first of all, we're contacted by a gentleman who wants to put a replacement bench in the park. the cost was $750. But if you recall, I recently asked if we could look at those prices and rules, so I don't know how we should proceed with this, if we allow this gentleman to make a donation for $750. I think this is to replace a different bench, a bench we already have, or is this a new bench? You know, so, do we go forward and tell them to donate, if we donate the $750, we'll do a bench, or do we want to wait until we have some kind of policy process in place?
Did he make a comment where he would like to place the bench?
No, you were on that email, that Mr. Helen said. So, I think it was to replace a bench that's already at the park.
Okay, I understand there's a couple that are in need of replacement that aren't within the parameters of the.
The playground area is full now. It will be when we get that last bench. So I guess, I just need to know where we go from here. Do we have a plan if it's a replacement and $750 doesn't really cover the cost?
Okay, question I have, when we were building the playground and people were purchasing benches, they would call the hall.
Because we knew they had settled on $750, but it was either gonna be 5 benches or 7, but somehow 8 foundations got put in, so the lack of communication, I guess. So I'm looking for something I just need to know, like, take $750, that doesn't cover the cost for.
Well, what I'm trying to get to is that when people wanted to purchase a bench, they would call the
They
hall,
would call here,
they would talk to you,
right,
and then they would come and bring the check to you.
right,
Okay. Well, the $750 was a flat handle bench, if I recall, right?
right.
Okay, $750 will not cover a regular bench.
Not by the time we did the plaque and the foundation and the delivery.
Okay. Now, he wants the plaque also to be part of it, is it?
I think so, because it's a memory of somebody.
Okay.
And then I guess the other question is if the bench is replacing a bench that's already there that has a plaque on it, what's the process? Does that one just
Front
go?
and back.
It's not a bad idea. Side by side.
So
Side by side.
the 3 benches that we ordered, I think the price was $575 just for the bench. And the freight was $370.
That's 055.
But the freight was the same if you ordered.
Yeah, we ordered 3 of them.
You know.
We got 3 of them coming. Now, so, is this Matt Valenci?
Mhm.
Look,
If you look at column there and find out what he really wants to do.
But then to make it even more confusing, Cindy Nairn and Mrs. Harvey they got different benches for less money. So maybe that's something Jerry and I need to look at. Or do we want to match what we
yeah, they
already
got some really nice, that look like they belong in a butterfly garden. The benches we have around the playground, they're designed to take a meeting,
Okay,
you know, with people.
all right.
You know what, I can show Matt one of these, you know what, maybe Monday, whatever, a couple of questions.
Yes, at 7 o'clock.
And have them come, in the meantime, take a look at the benches we have, and then see if, the other thing is, I don't know if we want to put that expensive a bench out in the porch, and we just get the advice. Just bring in Monday night and serve lunch and stuff.
Are you gonna call him?
The other thing I would recommend is, if the park committee is meeting, perhaps they want to take a look at, how many benches we want to put in the park and what the locations may be. I know we're talking about strategic planning, but, are we at one stage going to have 100 benches?
Right.
Indiscriminately placed.
Yeah.
So, you got to take a look at that as well if we're thinking about this bench policy here. How much we're going to charge, where we're going to put them.
And then the other thing too is as they decompose over the years, is the replacement on the village or is that just kind of the end of it? I know Tim got, some rules from the park district or something, how they handle it, but so are we forever indebted them to keep replacing the benches? So that would be a good thing to have in the policy.
Now,
process.
the 3 benches that were ordered, did they arrive?
No, I don't think.
Is it the same style bench as the playground?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, are they already paid for? I mean, are there 3 people who want the benches?
One of them is paid for by Sally Westmoss's family, so we ordered 2 extra.
Okay, so perhaps the gentleman that you're going to contact to take a look at the benches around the playground, he may say he may want one of those, perhaps.
Dennis has got a good point. We want to start putting $800 benches around. The benches we got are hardy, and the benches are replacing the.
Well, the point that Dennis makes is a valid point, and it's something we work with CT, because they have a strategic plan.
I don't know if the CT would get down to deal with.
I'm thinking it'd be down the benches, but, you know, I mean, there's a cost benefit associated with the bench. You know, a more expensive bench is probably gonna last longer depending on what material. Natural materials are gonna deteriorate quicker, especially out in an open weather environment. So, you know, this is good grounds. I know that when I was chairing Parks Committee, that one of the members of the committee is involved in, you know, lawn and garden work. And he took on the role to say he would approach the committee with some recommendations. And he seemed to be very much in favor of the synthetic bench. So, you know, I mean, yeah, there may be $1, but I think that, you know, sometimes, you know, if you pay a little bit more, you get a little bit more value. There's benches that you probably get at Home Depot that cost a couple of $100 and, you know, they won't last that long unless they're undercover. But, you know, all good food for conversation on the committee, I think, is the placement, how many. You don't want to have, you know, a load of benches all over the place. And I think Danielle brings up a good point too. Is it the responsibility of the village that, you know, we're taking on the responsibility in perpetuity to replace these benches? And if that's the case, then maybe we ought to be taking a look at the initial cost being a little bit higher if we're gonna replace them in the future.
Well, the mayor is going to invite the gentleman in question to our meeting on Monday, and that'll be part of the discussion.
Can't give you a history of the benches at the top of the hill. When you stand at the plate on the pavilion looking up, there's 4 benches up there. One of them was paid for by the family of Candy Rhodes. She was a John Carroll student who died. It was a $161 bench built by the Amish. It did not last long. We replaced it and told them, that's it. You know, the other bench was paid for by the Dietrich family, and it had 2 plaques on it, and it disappeared. We replaced that one. Someday it wasn't there anymore. It was just like, how in the heck did, yeah.
So another request I got today was from Chagrin Lakes HOA to hold their annual meeting at Village Hall this Sunday, April 3rd at 4:30. So for the last 2 that requested, and at the last meeting, we approved, council approved the commission, and waived the $25 fee, so I don't know if council will approve this, and
What HOA is that again?
Chagrin Lakes
This is a Sunday,
this Sunday.
so we need a village employee to open and close the building.
Well, no, the police always do that.
Is it?
But we also have a funeral going on, so we'll have to speak. So,
The chief and I attend these things. We used to start them in Machado. So we would be back to the property committee. We want to make a motion to waive the $25 fee.
Okay, at this time, I would like to make a motion that we waive the $25 fee for Chagrin Lakes HOA.
we approved the meeting here, April 3rd.
for April 3rd.
Thank you.
And I'll second.
Then moved and seconded, discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You guys, property committee agenda is huge.
The next thing was the police department received a donation for $100 for cops and kids fishing, so I would need a motion to accept that donation.
Who's the commission for?
Priscilla Holt, which is.
Crystal, I'm sorry, was it? I'd like to make a motion that we accept the donation to the police department.
I'll second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passed.
So the next thing we have is, on February 28th, council approved the memorandum of understanding with the county for the Washington Street paving. I was called by the county engineer this afternoon at 3 o'clock, and the lawyers did not accept the language. They had to change some language in the MOU, and they wanted us to revise our ordinance. So at 4 o'clock, I got all the information and forwarded it to Bridie, and that's my kudos today, because at 4 o'clock now, she got it all together. So we have to one ordinance to repeal the one we did February 28th, and another one to do the new one if you want us to change. rules.
Yeah, so just really quick, and the lawyer, by the way, is not the solicitor, just to let you know, okay? But, in any event, what changed was there was an additional mileage, that's put on for the part of Washington Street, so that was annexed by the village, that's actually in Bainbridge Township, so it's, oh yeah, 0.04. And in addition, it's actually, the estimate of the cost is an additional $10,000. And then, as I understand from Eric, I confirmed all of this with Eric at 4 o'clock today, that the additional cost includes the chance for contingencies. So it was 110,000, it's now the estimate is 120,000. So they have asked us to revise our memorandum of understanding, our ordinance approving the memorandum of understanding. The memorandum of understanding is actually changing with respect to that 0.04 and the cost.
So we'll have the street committee chair.
Do you want to see it first?
Please,
Of course.
'cause I don't want them coming back.
Well, the thing is, to be clear, really quick, so the next meeting is the commissioners meet on April 12th, and our meeting is April 11th, so then it seems hard to get on their agenda, so. Then we were considering special meetings, so Friday did her password. and she wanted it,
So Mark, the first one is the ordinance repealing the previous ordinance, the second one is the new one approving the new MOU that counts for 0.04 miles and additional.
And as a matter of procedure, ordinarily, if we're going to repeal an ordinance, don't we have to do 3 readings?
No, we could wait.
Well, I know, but we would
Correct.
have to wait,
I'm sorry.
right?
Yes, and my recommendation would be to at least waive the repeal, if not also the one approving, because again, of the fact that the county's opening bids on April 12th and our next meeting.
They're opening bids this week, I think.
Oh.
I think the commissioners are approving the bids on April.
I'm sorry. So there is a time, is of the essence, okay, and declare an emergency.
Yes.
Yep, thank you.
Very good. Now, Mayor, shall we I'd like to introduce an ordinance repealing ordinance number 2022-21, which dealt with memorandum of understanding between the village of South Russell and the Geauga County engineer regarding resurfacing Washington Street, declaring an emergency and move to waive further readings. Second.
Roll call.
Porter.
Aye.
Bell. Berger. Canton. Kavanaugh. Willie.
There's no motion to adopt, is there?
Yeah.
Move to adopt. Second.
Porter.
Aye.
Bell. Berger. Canton. Kavanaugh. Willie.
I'd like to introduce an ordinance approving a memorandum of understanding between the village of South Russell and the Geauga County engineer and the board of commissioners for the resurfacing of Washington Street, declaring an emergency and move to waive further readings. Second.
Roll call.
Porter.
Aye.
Bell. Berger. Canton. Kavanaugh. Willie.
Move to adopt. Second.
Porter.
Aye.
Bell. Berger. Canton. Kavanaugh. Willie.
Okay, we repealed one and passed another. Thank you. Thank you too for your hard work later today.
At the last meeting, Chris told everybody that we're trying to plan an appreciation luncheon for Friday, May 20th, and we'll get that solidified and let you know. We're calling around, trying to get prices and quotes from different restaurants in the village. Working on getting the tax budget worksheets together, I should have listed the department heads in the next day or two. We're hoping to be in better shape for that tax budget time this year when we go to the county. So we're asking that the committees really work with the department heads and At this point in the year, we don't need your official budget, but we need to know the big things. We don't need to surprise in the middle of council meeting that we need a truck. Because, right, if this time of year we have to do our revenues, which is when I have to estimate all the transfers for next year, and then it kind of limits us when we do the budget. So if the committees can meet with those department heads, just what are the big things, what do you think? Are you gonna have a larger road program that we buy a new truck, 2 cruisers, anything out of the ordinary? So I can get, the transfers figured out for next year, because that's what limits the budget in the fall. And I think that's it.
Questions of our fiscal officer?
Oh, one last thing, just so you know, in front of you was the farmer's market agreement, which we got into the properties committee, and we did get, the solicitor got the map and the insurance, so it's attached there, and that's supposed to be attached to the contract. We didn't have that on the original, but out in the council packet, so I'm going to put that.
Technically, Ruth got it.
Okay, so welcome.
Okay, we are at fiscal auditor.
Well, I presented my report for the month ended February 28th, 2022, our last meeting, so I have no further report tonight.
Questions of our fiscal
Our
auditor?
debt questions.
Finance committee.
All right. Oh, it's gonna be interesting. Finance committee met March 16th. The minutes are included as a part of your council packages. After I do my report, I'm also gonna, ask if there's any additional comments from my colleague on the financial committee, given this meeting. The meeting largely, in addition to the standard financial items that we cover, largely responded to a series of questions that were proposed by the mayor. So I would encourage all hands to take a look at the meeting minutes. I know sometimes we have a tendency to breeze over them, but there's a couple of interesting items in here, and a couple of them are teed up. But one of the things that I'll address first is the new agreement between the Valley Fire Department and the village. And as part of the action items on the committee side, I was asked to reach out to the fire department and find out when they would anticipate having a proposed contract before us, so that we could hopefully get it early, review it, and engage those costs in our budgeting for the following year. Now, reached out a couple of times to the fire department, was finally responded to by an individual by the name of Mark Vetter. He explained a little bit of the contract process, indicated that typically the fire department has provided the contract for review to communities in the October-November timeframe. He did provide that last year. He believed he got the contract to us in September. And I asked him if they anticipated that there would be any, additional costs included in the contract. And things got a little bit more flexible there, and made allusions to inflation, additional fuel costs. The takeaway that I had was, yes, there will be additional costs involved in the new contract. Largely, the substantive provisions of the contract will largely remain the same, okay? So he is going to try to get this proposal to us as early as possible so we can use it in our budget planning process, but he didn't anticipate maybe the very late July or early August, which is an improvement from last year. So we look forward to that, and we'll stay engaged with the Valley Fire Department to talk about that contract. While I'm on the subject of the fire department, the mayor mentioned earlier in the meeting that you have a contract proposal before you. And I would sincerely ask every one of the council members to take a good look at the contract proposal. There's some interesting language in it. Nothing talks to the non-binding agreement as we as council previously agreed in our deliberations when the issue of a donation to the fire department came up. There are some questions on whether this whole issue could be, given our recent education, could be addressed by a SID or a bond amendment. It's interesting that some of their language indicates that the contributions that come from the municipalities and townships will be expended first before any voluntary contributions to the project. And that, this is interesting because the Valley Fire Department doesn't own the building. It rents it from Chagrin Falls for $1 a year, but there is language in here which indicates the fire department, upon final completion of improvements, shall transfer ownership of the fire station to the village of Chagrin Falls. The village of Chagrin Falls, upon acceptance of the fire station, shall maintain the fire station at its sole expense for the life of the building, including all maintenance and operation costs. But there's also language which says that any additional funds will be provided to Chagrin Falls that are left over after the project for maintenance of the building. So there's some interesting language. I hope that, the finance committee and safety committees will digest the proposal, but I would invite all my fellow council members to please take a good hard look, because at least in my mind, it raised more questions than it answered. So, given that, there was a question that came up at the finance committee meeting on what was the funds that were raised through voluntary contributions so far for the project. Verbiage in the proposed contract would indicate that approximately $800,000 has been raised through voluntary contributions. The only thing that I don't know is whether the assessments to the various villages and townships is included in that $800K amount. So, please take a look at it, and, maybe we can have a discussion at the following council meeting about, how we want to go forward with a particular project. Let's see.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How many pages is the escrow agreement that's included A?
You don't have a copy of it?
I have 3 pages. I'm just wondering, it looks like it ends at section 5.2.
I'm seeing 3, and then there's the actual agreement assigned to it.
I can't.
It doesn't seem to end, I guess.
No.
Oh, okay. Just want to try to have the full.
No, frankly, the same paper, I just copied, I got this when I was on vacation, so I copied it this morning. I took out the last 3 pages, which are just all signature pages.
Even on the escrow agreement? Because it just seems odd. It's like 5.2 notices, it says if to escrow. I don't know if you guys are following along the last page.
I can send everybody the
Okay.
electronic copy,
I
I
think
just read these this morning, but I just didn't want to.
Sure.
have
Maybe an
pages of
email,
signatures.
yeah. Yep.
Right, got it.
I think there'd be a form selection clause, venue clause,
A lot of.
indemnification, and all the rest of it.
Absolutely.
And if there isn't, I'd be surprised if no one would sign it.
Well, and that's why I invited your attention to take a good close look at it, because the paper that was presented to me raised more questions than it answered. So just to be above board as we go forward with the deliberations about the contribution to the Valley Fire Department. One of the items that we discussed at the fiscal or finance committee meeting was that, the whole issue of Cindy Nairn asking for a refund for a bench that she had originally made a donation for was discussed. And Cindy had asked that, the $750 that she provided to purchase a bench would be refunded, because I guess she has partnered with the Butterfly Garden benches and decided that she liked that option better. I think she asked for her entire $750 back, but what we elected to do on the finance committee was to charge her the cost of the plaque, which was not in the Butterfly Garden bench estimation. So she was returned that, but there was also the question on whether, Mrs. Harvey should pay for her inscription, her plaque for her bench. I made the recommendation that we should waive the money, any charges to Mrs. Harvey, because I think it was petty to ask for payment for a plaque when she generated or donated a large amount of that garden. So I had indicated in the finance committee, though, making a recommendation to council to waive the cost of the plaque for Mrs. Harvey at tonight's meeting. So if we want to take a pause, I can either wait to the end of the report, or, I can make the motion right now. So,
We can do it right now.
okay. I'd like to move that council waive any costs associated with a memorial plaque for the bench that is in the butterfly garden somewhere. Purchased by Mrs. Harvey. Okay.
Been moved, we have a second,
Second.
second by Berger, discussion.
One question, is Cindy getting her plaque?
Cindy's got I don't know if the plaque's been made yet, but we have funds for that plaque.
We didn't give her that refund, and we do have the plaque, I believe.
I mean, she pays the $155 or whatever it is, she should get her plaque. right?
Yeah, she'll get
It'll be installed on the bench.
Got it, okay.
Any
So,
other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? All right.
as, in response to one of the mayor's questions about, statement that we never know what's in the budget. And, perhaps we could potentially look forward going next year into starting the budget process early. One of the things after discussion with the fiscal officer is that we could potentially look, and I don't think we could do it any earlier than late September or October, given a lot of the information that we just don't have until about that time. It's going to be an interesting year because some of the projects that have been on the books for a long time will be adding expenses to as they go forward. So I think we need to take a look at maybe early October for a potential date. So I would ask that all council members review their October calendars, and we can open it to discussion in terms of when we'd like to have our budgetary planning meetings. The other side of that is, should council decide to do a strategic meeting on the direction of the village, we may want to address the strategic meeting first before. So we've got a window of opportunity. I believe October is the month that we may want to look at. And especially given, the contractual obligations with the fire department and other things that are going on in terms of village projects. So I would like to, ask council to think about that, and we'll address it at the next meeting and open it for discussion. Let's see. Okay, I did mention the 800K, and let's see. And Chris, any questions about adding to the street program? I'll defer that to you, or any other action items that you may feel suitable to report on for finance.
No, because the question was raised about the street program and additional streets to be repaid under that program. And I suggested that at finance, it was not an appropriate issue for finance to consider. It was a streets issue. And when streets made their call, then finance would come back and say, if there was a finance issue, we would deal with it. So I think that's the only thing that needs to be said about that. We'll try to keep everybody in their lane.
Okay. Now, in terms of the report, that largely concludes the hot topics on the report, subject to any of your questions before I make a motion to acknowledge receipt and review of the credit card report.
As I think your committee minutes mentioned that there was a strategic planning session last fall.
I know my memory doesn't serve me whether we had one last fall. I know in the 4 years that I've been on council, we have had strategic meetings. It has been some form of advanced look at, it hasn't been necessarily a 5-year plan. it's been more closer to the fourth, you know, in terms of maybe looking forward to the next year. And it often was kind of like a precursor to, we talk about what we'd like to do, and then precursor to the budget meeting where we'd say, here's what we think we'll need in terms of operation of the village at that time.
So there's not a written plan out there from last year.
You know,
That's what we need. In my opinion, that's what we really need. We usually do the budget work session, hopefully the work for them, just working through whatever is outstanding. That's why I'm hoping the committees are working with the department heads this time of year for the tax budget, and say they want to talk, then by the time they come in October, they better have their, then by the time they come in October, they better have their three quotes. So to have real numbers rather than seeing the budget work sessions. I think the bathrooms will cost 80 grand, and somebody else says, you know, to have some more for numbers, cost 80 grand, and somebody else says, you know, to have some more for numbers. So if we do the budget work session the first week of October, if you want to do a strategic planning meeting before that, then maybe sometime in September.
no, and I concur with the fiscal officer, and quite frankly, you know, there'll be a lot of emphasis as we go down the year by the finance committee to say, you know, I guess, emphasize to department heads the need for good numbers. You know, there appeared to be frustration on the part of the mayor about, you know, not knowing what the budget is, but I would offer that it's the opinion of the finance committee that most of that frustration stems from late-breaking add-ons or people not having the foresight to add them in their budget proposals. And some examples of that is a $70K contribution to Jim Valley Fire, or an additional, you know, couple of streets in the road program. You know, a late breaker on a truck, or a vehicle, or a piece of equipment. You know, but these are things that the department head should be taking a look early on, identifying the requirement, identifying the needs, or a new building, or a new bay to a building, or whatever. But, you know, we need to have some accurate cost estimates as we go forward in planning the budget. And I think that will do a lot to reduce some of the frustration that's being felt about budget numbers. So, let's see. All right, given that there is no other discussion, or appears to be no other discussion on the finance committee, I'd like to make a motion that we acknowledge receipt and review of the March 28th, 22 credit card report. So moved.
Seconded. Discussion on the credit card. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right.
That concludes our report.
Well, Dennis, I also put under finance, I got that in from the county auditor, I forwarded it to everybody last week. The information.
Oh, the training?
SID thing, and that, so the Geauga County auditor, is willing to take the steps to make a program for a county-wide program for the SIDs, if there are enough taxing districts who are interested in utilizing this mechanism. This would mean the county would help to standardize the process so that each tax district may benefit if and when there is need. Essentially, this program is a way to help taxpayers with issues that arise mostly, but not exclusively from water, without them having to pay out of pocket, tax bill, credit, or worry about losing their investment should they decide to move. He wanted an answer by Friday. I told him we didn't have a meeting until today. I don't know if that's something council's interested in, or.
Well, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way I interpreted the auditor's proposal about the SID is that we all, as municipalities and townships that are in Geauga County, all come together and form a collective SID. You know, that's the way I viewed it. Is that the way you're looking at it?
I don't think all have to be.
No.
They don't have to be, but I think that's, in a perfect world, I think that's where you'd like to go.
Has public utilities all talked about the e-SIMs?
About that, in the sense that who's going to decide where the money goes?
Well, they, as the SID, they form their own board, so
Right.
you have representation from each.
Sure, what I'm getting at, is the county going to decide this?
I don't think they, I think it has to be representatives from the SID. This kind of came out quick, I think the SIDs are a good thing. I know that the Parklands are planning on doing or South Party But it seemed to be that council kind of thought a SID might be a good idea, but I don't know. I don't know enough about it to know if you're ready, that's why I forwarded it to you guys, because it's your decision.
Why don't we just keep going with it until it costs us money, then we make the decision.
Okay, but I was on the presentation, and I thought it was very clear that it had to have some connection to water, to erosion, or some kind of natural water issue. And as someone asked about doing their driveways or something like that, and they said unless it had a water connection, it didn't make a lot of sense. So from that perspective, the SID is limited in what we can address to it because it's got to have a water component to it. Did everybody else get the same, who was on the call, did you get the same
Yes.
impression?
And there are other SIDs, sorry, just really quick, there are the ones that just came out this past summer in July, which has to do with the water and the water source. There are other SIDs, special improvement districts, actually, those have been around.
And those don't have anything to do with water.
Correct, so I think this one is,
The
I'm
E-SID
wrong, this is specific to
is specific to water, and the SID in and of itself is just a special improvement district.
But
That doesn't.
But then you have to have a separate SID for each type of interest. And those would have their own independent boards. Okay, so,
This is an erosion.
thank you, okay. So, I don't know why we want to jump into this without knowing more about it. This seems rushed, in my opinion.
You're talking about the county SID?
Yeah, this countywide but it's a SID only for erosion issues, for water erosion issues.
What about water quality?
That didn't appear to apply,
No.
according to the presentation.
No,
Damage or potential damage caused by water or erosion.
right,
Because some of the illustrative examples were also kind of tied to some of the watershed partners projects as well. That's what they were using as some of their illustrations. But,
Why not forward to that? You learn.
well,
And then we can always back
my question, okay, my question is, if we commit to being a part of it, are all of a sudden, when we start to accrue expenses from the legal firm, from McDonald, et cetera, is there going to be a share that's going to be presented to us as our bill?
This isn't that part of the SID, right? So
Well, that's the whole idea, is to share all the expenses. Now we're committed
That's why I don't understand the
to
motion.
paying all these expenses, and if they set the SID up and it costs $20,000, what portion of that is gonna end up on South Russell's doorstep? I'd like to know that before we say, let's go plunging into this.
So could you contact Chuck and try to get those kind of,
I'd be happy to make the phone call.
does anyone know any other municipalities or townships that have said yes?
I don't know, this just came out on Wednesday.
I know.
We need
Yeah,
to
well,
know by Friday, that's why I
The
said.
township that was in the lead was Bainbridge, but I don't know that they've made the commitment.
Okay,
You know, that they've been the most vocal in saying we want this.
See, that's my issue, you know, we're a little village, they have, 3-4 times our population, Chardon and all the rest. You know, if we were part of this, let's say, and it's run by the county commissioners, in effect, or by Bainbridge, or by Chardon, and we get a bill, thank you very much, here's your bill for water quality, or water erosion fixed in Hardin.
By McFarland.
Right, well, it wouldn't be the commissioners, there'd be a board immediately established. We would have representation on the board, but we could be outvoted 8-1 and committed to spending money in the administration of this
Yeah.
process that would only impact Hartford or Middlefield or somewhere else in the county beyond us. And so that's the question. I mean, if we think we're going to have projects that fall under the ESID parameters, well, then maybe it makes sense for us to do this. If we don't, then I don't know why we would put ourselves at risk for costs.
We don't have so much an erosion problem in South Russell as a volume problem.
But it can be used. So I don't know if you watched the webinars, it was pretty good, they discussed how you can move rivers and adjust where the water
I
goes.
believe I was on the beach in Mexico.
Yeah. Well, I sent you the link to
Reasonably
watch the
confident I
recording.
was not watching this.
Because you can arguably make a connection between the water and erosion. Yes, there could be a connection, like the parking dam would be a good example.
The erosion of the dam, I get that, but I think we need more information before we plunge into this.
Maybe public utilities should delve into this further.
And I will make a call to the auditor and ask his opinion.
Let's step
You know, I mean, if it turns out it's like NOACA, where it doesn't hurt us to be there and we occasionally benefit from it. You know, maybe it's worth being part of.
They can't get a penny out of us until we sign something, right?
Is
We
that
make a call to-
signature mean the agreement to participate in this? You know?
Yeah, that's when we make a decision.
I'm
But
happy.
that's what's being asked for by Friday, right?
No, last Friday.
Last Friday, I asked her.
Absolutely. I thought the training said they need at least 5 committees, is that correct?
I don't think so, because you could have a sit of one that's,
We can have our own SID.
Which we'll get to.
We could.
but the whole purpose of it is to buy up the cost. But then we don't, the administrative part, when we don't know if we're ever gonna use it, then
Public, yes, public utilities.
Public
You got
utilities
it.
will take the lead on this, and I will make a call and report back.
Any other questions for the finance committee?
The one thing that I would, just this is not a question, but a comment, the hidden in the fiscal officer's report is a report that probably falls under the clerk of council responsibilities, and that is the open meeting regulations. So again, you know, it's a great education for all council members, and I would invite all members to take a look at what the regulations are that guide open meetings. So, thank you.
Any other questions of the finance committee? I have one. So are we having our first budget meeting on Monday, October 3rd?
The committee answer is, we offered to council to take a look at schedules to determine that. And there was also an open question about strategic planning. If we are going to do strategic planning, there would probably be a recommendation that we conduct a strategic planning meeting first prior to the budget, so we know what we want to commit funds to. What Danielle had offered is that previously, we've done it sometime in the first week of October. So, you know, it could be the first, it could be later, but, you know, I would offer that perhaps we discuss in new business today, that whether we want to have a form of a strategic planning meeting for council members as we go forward in the year.
Any other questions of the finance committee? Solicitor,
Yes.
floor is yours.
So I just wanted to briefly touch base again about the forfeiture process. And I'm happy to attend any building committee meeting if you want to kind of go through this a little bit more. But there was an issue, or I found an issue with a statute that basically says that any money that's received by a public official and it's not paid out according to law, is supposed to be retained there until claimed by the rightful owner for 5 years. And it's in a trust fund. The difference is that when you go through the forfeiture process, this is money that has been put up regardless if it's the contractor or the property owner or whomever. There was a failure to follow through, a final inspection or an electrical inspection or whatever the case may be. And it's been sitting there for over a year. And that's when the notice goes out from the building inspector that says, hey, there's this money, you have deficiencies you need to correct. You have 30 days to do so. And if there's, you know, a correction, great. And the deposit gets refunded, or the amount that comes out from the inspection fees, and then the rest goes back to the owner or the contractor. If the deficiencies are not corrected, then another notice goes out and says you have 10 days essentially to appeal this, but otherwise this money is going to be forfeited to the village. As I understand it, the money is held in fiduciary funds. I think they're called fiduciary funds, they're similar to like a trust fund, I suppose. But the point is that once it goes through this process and it is not the deficiencies are not corrected, and there is no appeal, they're no longer, whoever deposited the money, regardless if it's the property or the country, are no longer the rightful owner of that money. So the forfeiture process that we have is legitimate and it complies with state law. The point though is that I don't think, I think the mention was, well, can we, tweak this since it's not necessarily in the Ohio Revised Code as to exactly how the forfeiture has to go. But as far as, there definitely has to be a notice to correct the deficiencies first. And then the second notice is the notice of the forfeiture with the appeal rights. That has to be made. I think the 1 year is, a good amount of time. I think that's probably fair with respect to how much construction has to be done and maybe inspections incur. But it does not, it can revert from that point, once it is actually forfeited and there's no appeal to council. It can revert back to the general fund. So I guess my point is if this is all going to be revised, if this ordinance is all going to be revised, I just would think that, again, I'm happy to attend a building committee meeting, but let's talk about the notice. I think the notice of the 30 days and then the notice of the 10 days after that period is run, I think it's I don't think anything less than that would be the process.
So the 1 year would start ticking when then, right?
Well, that's a good question. So that's actually part of maybe the issue we might have. Is it, according to our ordinance, it says it's 1 year after there's been no significant activity of construction on the property. The 12 months are the run. It's actually technically more than 12 months. It's really a year plus, right? So no significant, I'm not sure what that means by significant activity. Does that mean, a lot of times people are already inside the houses, I'm sure they're occupying them, and maybe things haven't been finished. So I don't know what significant activity means. Does that mean workers on the property?
So by the time we send out notice 1 and notice 2, the 1 year is likely to that.
The 1 year has already passed.
Yes.
Before you even send out that does have another question. So I don't know, I mean, at the building committee meetings, I'm assuming that Dave is usually there, and Ruth, I would assume. I mean, there should definitely be communication as to how are we tracking these, just in general. In other words, yes, I understand that, we want the owner or the contractor to come back and always get the final inspection or do whatever they have to do. But oftentimes that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that I want to put more work on the building department, but perhaps maybe there should be some also follow-up to make sure that they're not more than 12 years, or excuse me, 12 months. Not 3 years if it is, the funds that are there, that's all. Maybe just a ticker that says, hey, after, 13, 14 months, we check. Because as I understand it, I could be wrong, but I don't know actually. I don't know if the funds are fully accounted for and how long they've been. But I think there's a way to track it, and all I'm saying is let's just make sure that we do
We know the day that the deposit was made.
that. I think so, I don't know, I
But
have
that's not dispositive. Because you apply for a permit to put up a building. How long does it take you to put that building up from the date of that application of permit? It could take you 6 months or 8 months to complete the house or whatever. Then, once that's completed, now the clock starts to run on the 1 year.
Sure, what I'm saying is the contractor, the homeowner, or the building owner put down the construction deposit, right? So we know that date for sure.
Right.
And then there's presumably some follow-up along the way where Dave goes out and inspects the footers, does this, that, and everything, documents it. So we know that the start date and the progress, what we don't know is whether they come back for a final to get their money back. And as I recall, a lot of contractors, it's not enough. They want to get off the job site and get on to the next job rather than go through a final inspection and get their $1,000. So I see what Brian's saying about this. We at least know when they pulled the permit. Whether they actually did anything is another matter.
Right, that's where that
Permits all the
significant,
time and then they'll do it.
yeah, that's where that significant activity has ceased. I'm not really sure what that means, but I would assume that, in how we've sent out notices before, there must be something, that kind of triggers the no significant activity.
Jerry, from your knowledge on building, do we have deposits that are in excess of 5 years and been sitting there?
When I were over there working on the city force, training, they were trying to find if there's a report somewhere in that system that will say how old it is. So that, when I was last there, the gentleman was working on that, so maybe Rick has some.
Okay, so if perhaps the computer system can be helpful to us in tracking these open permits.
And it is something we did ask going forward with the new software, that they have something in there for this to track.
Is that what City Force is?
The new one, then we had EDS, but that, now we're going to City Force, so we're transferring all that little information over to the new software.
Thank you, Solicitor, that's helpful.
Questions of our solicitor? All right, we're down to the street committee.
Oh, okay. School committee, minutes, March 11th, the minutes are in your packet. A couple of updates. I believe the road program went out for bid last week. Is that the accurate thing on Friday? And we should hear back from bidding contractors in the next 3 weeks or so, I think it is.
Yeah, I don't remember the date, but it has to advertise for at least 2 weeks.
Yeah. So by the end of April, we'll have certainly enough information to go on from bidding contractors to allow an award perhaps, and we'll see if the alternate roadway is economically feasible or not. But if we did all the roads that were put out for bid, it's a $750,000 road program, which is not the biggest road program we've ever done, but it's probably number 2 on the list. I think Bell Road West was more, but we did agreements on that one. So that is going to be probably a subject of discussion at the last meeting in April, the latest, I think, for going out an award of the bids for the road program 2022. We also had discussion about the cemetery maps that Tim brought up, and my recollection, Danielle, is that they're like $5,400.
They were 5,800, so when I was looking at the budget, and then, I thought there was a sale or something, so then they were 2,400, so I said we could pull the 2,400 this year. But now it's back to 58, so I'm not quite clear. I put a feel for 2,400. If it's the 5,800, I would have to run the budget.
I think we may want to do that because it seems to me that there was a significant cost savings if you ordered them all at once in terms of shipping. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, I think 2,400 was only for half of that, so you wanted to fine.
If you paid the same amount, no matter how many mats you shipped. So Tim was talking about 20 mats, I think. Well, 10 would be the half, right? And then the 20 would be the full. So our
Somebody needs to hold 5,800.
yes, and I'm not thinking they're gonna get here before Sunday, but, you know, after that, it'll help preserve the grounds for later use. The machines won't tear up the ground as much in the spring because of the mats. We've been using plywood, doesn't work very well, and it's time that, as I remember Daryl bringing this up before we established the cemetery, that he wanted these things, and he said no because they were like $2,000. Well, now they're $5,400, and so be it. That was, years ago. Anyway, that's what we would recommend to council, that all 20 be bought for $5,700, Daniel?
5,800.
5,800. Mayor, if that's okay, we would make that motion to amend the budget to do that. Later in this meeting when the time comes. And as a note on the street committee, my plan is to have the next street committee meeting April 8th at 7:30 a.m. At the street commissioner's office for the purpose of discussing the road program and other things.
Does that need to be a special meeting?
No, it's a regularly scheduled meeting. It's the first Friday in.
Friday's first
I'm
Friday.
sorry, it's the first Friday, it's the Friday before the first council meeting. That's the way it works. Are you out of town, Chris?
No, I have it for this Friday, but I'll change it.
This Friday would be April 1st.
I mean, it would be the first Friday, but, Danielle, it's not on our calendar, is it?
Okay, yeah, that's-
Right.
You have it as the first? Has it been published as a meeting the first, Danielle?
I'm looking right now. She's doing a couple of things. Yes, it's listed as April 1st.
We will just go with April first then. We can leave it at that.
See you Friday.
Well, Tim's idea was one, you have the meeting before the first council. I always wanted to do it the Friday before the first council, so.
I think this month is probably the anomaly.
April first will work fine. It is after all April Fool's Day, so it's.
People are just handling the
Yes, I do. So April first it is. And that's all we have from the streets committee unless Councilman Bell has one.
I do not think.
I have a question about that Louise Drive sanitary sewer illicit discharge. Is that all good at this point? It's on your second page.
Last one we had from the county was that they had identified the source and they were working to correct it. Is that right? Yeah, the engineer made that report as part of our meeting. And I know it's of interest to people in Paw because that's where it goes.
Sure does.
Any other questions of the street committee? Hearing none, we're at the building committee.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Building committee will be meeting on April 7th. That's Thursday at 8 a.m. at the building office. I cordially invite our solicitor to attend if she
Yes,
is free.
you said April 7th, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
The engineer used to spell it.
Oh, I see, okay.
Look
Yeah.
out, bear claws.
I,
You gotta do better than the engineer, buddy.
I'll do that.
I yield the floor to Councilman Bell if he has anything to add.
I'm just gonna have, we'll definitely get back into what you mentioned in your report about the aging of the closet, but since you're gonna be there, I feel like.
Can you come with maybe the first 3 steps that we need to do
Or,
for on this deposit?
On the
Things that maybe
forfeiture?
we
Sure.
can start getting done.
Yeah.
Maybe do this.
I think they already have it.
Okay, questions of the building committee? We're at the safety committee.
All right. See on the agenda that there is a topic item for the safety committee about should involve voluntary fire department donation contract. That's all we've been addressed largely in the finance committee. And we'll have further discussion at a future council meeting. I do want to invite everyone's attention that part of the council package included a resignation letter in the case of Sergeant Beazer. So he is retiring from the police department, local boy, retiring.
Wow.
27 years.
That's right. So, that's part of the package, and subject to your questions, that concludes the report of the city.
Questions of the safety committee?
He said he didn't want an exit interview. Do we just say, okay, or should we kind of insist?
It's part of our handbook. You
Well,
have
it's-
to go through.
In the handbook, that's something they added last time around. It used to not pay out anything for vacation, so it's an incentive to pay out for vacation. If you did the exit interview, you would pay 2 weeks for vacation. But I don't think he's going to pay out if he's taking the time off, so
How would you really know until he uses up his last vacation, right? Bruce, that's a good point. I think you can charm him into an exit interview. I think it's necessary. Other questions of the safety committee?
One additional comment is the next meeting of the safety committee is scheduled for Tuesday, 7 April at 9 a.m. at police department.
Just for your information, when Ruth and I pulled in here about 4 o'clock on Saturday, we saw the chief in a cruiser. Because he was the only one working. He had just, in fact, he told me he would not be here tonight. He worked 14 straight days and he looked shocked.
19 straight
Your lieutenant's on vacation.
Between vacations and some sickness,
That's what that symbol for downstairs.
he's been working very hard. All right, we are now at the HR committee.
Thank you, Mayor. Consistent with the letter of resignation I would start with asking in a motion to accept Sergeant David Beezer to accept his resignation.
Effective.
Effective May 7th, 2022.
Krueger made a motion, Andrew seconded it.
Discussion.
Something like that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Sergeant Beezer's resignation is accepted.
Okay. As part of the conversation on exit interviews, I think it should be, we should look at amending the handbook and saying it is a requirement of the position, that the village employee, if they are leaving, that they be willing to sit and go through an exit interview. Obviously, with the exception of death or significant disability, they should make themselves available.
And your leverage would be what?
I think it needs to be stated as a policy statement. And this is not a carrot and stick position. This is just part of the job. When you come here, you have an entrance interview, or several. When you leave, you have an exit interview. You have the opportunity to gain some
We learned.
knowledge of your experience with the village and what we can do better going forward.
Do we have to do this as termination for cause?
I still think there should be an exit interview.
There were a couple of circumstances where that would not have been productive.
Okay, well,
I can think of three off the top of my head.
okay. Then the decision to have an exit interview should be at the discretion of the mayor
In the department head.
and the department head.
One of the two, I put it on the mayor or his designee.
Okay, and that's fine, if the mayor so chooses not to have an exit interview. But I think as a matter of policy, we should favor having exit interviews.
I agree. But in certain circumstances, I mean,
Okay, so we need to amend the employee handbook.
Well, you know, just for clarification, you know, and Chris, I'm there with you saying, as a matter of policy, we ought to have the exit interviews. But by what we just had in the discussion, were we saying it's up to the mayor's discretion? Because if it then is up to an individual's discretion, then what's the sense of having a policy?
Well,
Or phraseology to say, as Mark suggested, potentially with the exception of individuals discharged for cause or whatever.
well, except in these particular circumstances, an exit interview will be conducted for all department employees. And then you have like two or three exceptions, you know, death, you know,
right,
termination for cause,
significant
disability.
disability, right, okay, or hardship.
Yeah, there's an exception rather than a discretion.
So what we will do from HR is we will write the policy statement and submit it to council for adoption to the employee handbook. How about
Is
that?
there any risk to us if we don't do an exit interview with someone in a leadership position like Dave Weezer? I mean, what if someone later says there's a problem and we shouldn't have been aware of it? And we weren't aware of it because we didn't do it.
I think you should have.
Well, if we didn't catch him
There is
before,
liability.
To not do.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, to do it,
I think
if
what-
he doesn't want to, number one, and number two, to not do it if we have this policy and we decide not to do it.
Adam's kind of talking about maybe an employee that leaves village employment and then months later says, I'm gonna file suit because
Correct.
of this.
That's one, that happens all the
The other
time.
risk is that another employee is still employed, is upset about an issue, and says you should have known about it. I told my superior, that he heard what that would be, and he didn't do an exit interview and find out.
So then you're saying you want the exit interviews or that they're.
I would especially for someone in a leadership position.
well, right now, it's everybody except for termination for cause, disability or death.
Or death, those are the three exceptions.
It's everybody.
I agree that it's very helpful to have an exit interview. I just don't understand what the consequence is for someone who doesn't do it. You're not gonna hold the picture. So I don't understand.
But
No, but
Chris is saying it's not a consequential thing, it's just part of.
it should be part of the policy that we want to
If
have.
I'm quitting, and you say it's part of the policy, all right, sweet, see you later.
Okay.
Well, then I think that absolves you of that responsibility later, if the person refused.
Right,
And
and
then
that
you could-
person
you
comes
could
back,
always
when that person comes back and sues the village later and says, well, you should have known, and and then our defense is, well, we asked you to sit down in an exit interview and explain to us the circumstances of why you left your employment with us, and you refused. How can we know if you don't sit down and tell us?
And you could have an administrative entry that just says, individual refused to exit interview.
Or
Document.
individual was scheduled, you didn't show.
Whatever that is, at least we made an effort in some way to have that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, we
Must do it.
could,
It was added to the policy, right, so if they want to get paid, but if someone's now out on vacation leave for the next month and a half,
Yeah, well, we can't force them,
right,
but at least we can make the effort to say, we wanted to have it, and you rejected us.
And articulate the policy in the handbook.
couldn't that be part of the employment though, that person?
Well, yeah, but at the point that they leave, if they're not looking for a recommendation from us going forward with some other employment, there's no incentive for them to actually sit for the exit interview.
Please put in the mayor and say President Pro Tem must hold the next interview.
Okay, well,
I wouldn't use that phraseology.
Yeah, the sheriff's property.
Can I ask a question first? Do you have the policy in front of you? Is this right now discretionary? I forget what it says. It's not in the records. May. Okay.
May.
Thank you.
We got a lot
but
of
my
people.
question is.
No, but we haven't had an executive HR committee pushing this forward is an issue, so. We want to do it, we want to establish a policy, and whoever chairs HR after myself and then Ruth, whoever takes it on, that this is part of the responsibility. And that the department chairs understand that it's an important part of our learning process going forward. So, with that,
Anything else we thought?
okay, we talked about the appreciation luncheon, which is the employees and all the other board members, et cetera, and that process is going forward. And I believe that is all that we have for the moment.
Questions of the HR committee?
When might we have another meeting then, Chris?
As I sat here tonight, I didn't have a date for you, so I'll have to come up, I'm not sure where the calendar is. Perhaps the fiscal officer can fill in my deficiency.
You have a lot of people on Good Friday. No, that's fine. HR is on April 14th at 8 o'clock.
Thank you very
That's
much.
the one we're gonna try to move to before the next council meeting to.
We will talk about that and see if we can get some sunshine.
Let me know, like we'll do that if somebody comes to that.
Okay,
All right, any other questions of HR? Property committee, you're up.
Okay, thanks again, Mayor. Property and Parks will meet Monday, April 4th at 7 PM here at the Village Hall. A couple things. At our February 28th meeting, Property and Parks, Haley Cruz, who is a senior at the Chagrin Falls High School, proposed a project, a senior project, to us, that she would plant 12 to 24 buckeye and oak trees at our park, mostly planted on top of the hill between Bell and East Washington. It would be supervised by her father and her grandfather. I plan on attending the planning. The Parks Committee supports this project 100%. I believe it was today, I forwarded her plan. And I would like to make a motion that we vote on this project.
And I seconded.
Discussion.
Is this in the form of reforestation area, Jerry?
I'm going to be quite honest with you. I asked her grandfather about exactly where these trees are going to be planted. And I can't say that it's up in the air, but he did recommend that it be planted, as I mentioned, on top of the hill around that area, where there were some trees that may have been damaged, and they want to plant those trees to replace them.
And the reason I bring it up is, if you're talking about on top of the little hill where the benches are, or in the reforestation area, which is that like forested area between the two sections in the park.
I believe that we can discuss that and come up with the best place to plant.
I mean, I'd like to know where she wants to put these
Right,
things.
right.
And, you know, I'm fine with her planting trees, but where? And almost every tree we planted in that reforestation area, way back, remember that, Bill? We dug the holes, you know, with the auger things, and all the kids came and planted. I think like 2 survived out of 120 or some crazy number. I don't know why, but Ted would probably know.
I believe they're going to put cages or whatever around it.
She said she put pictures.
Right. And I understand the need to know where these trees are going to be planted, okay? I mean, I understand that. That's why I asked him the question.
What's the time frame for
Well,
planting?
she requested that that be the first part of it.
We didn't know where she wants to plant though, I would think.
And she's out of town at a horse show through Wednesday, so there wasn't a lot of time for it right now.
I mean, if we could have that information before our next council meeting in April.
We can make this happen.
Okay,
Yeah, I
well,
just don't want to plant trees like around the playground.
I understand. That wasn't the plan, but I understand.
Understood, but, you know.
Okay, now, do we need to have a special meeting for this with the council?
No,
Just define where we want.
I know where you want, and we could do that on April the 11th. 2 weeks away now.
Okay.
So we have.
Are there any restrictions with the grant service agreement, or where you can place things?
That's a good question too.
The reforestation area is actually, per the terms of the original agreement, it had to be planted, which is why we did it.
And that's the connector section.
You know that little stream?
Yeah.
You cross the stream and you're into that like wooded section, and then you go out.
Yeah.
You know, right before you get to the, railroad thing. That's the area we agreed to try to reforest, which seems like a perfect place for oak and buckeye trees.
That's where again?
It's the reforestation area, right between the two sections of the park.
when you go into the little woods
Just
there.
north of the,
When you drove the tractor, Jerry.
Yeah.
You're going through the path there.
Yes.
You know, right before you hit the railway wheels.
Right.
And there was an area on the left.
Right. Which
Okay,
I didn't plant.
that had a load of little trees there that are now just dead. So,
There's a boulder with a plaque right there.
there is.
Okay, that's a very good place to put that.
It memorializes all the trees that died.
the Arlington. of
Well-
trees. Pretty much.
Well, with this motion I made, can I state that that's where the trees should be planted?
Well,
I would ask her if that's where she planned on doing it. That's the place that I would suggest is the best place to put it. But maybe Ted's got another view, because he knows more about trees and all that other stuff than I do.
and right now, I believe your motion only says that we should vote on it. But it doesn't say approve.
Well,
I mean, I have no
vote and
objection.
approve, of course.
I have no objection to the project. I'd just like to know where she wants to plant it.
I understand that. That's why I asked a question the other day, and it was ambiguous.
Okay. I mean,
So we gotta,
You can see it on the map over there on the wall. What I'm talking
so it's been moved and seconded,
I don't think it was a second.
moved and seconded. You want to, table this, or do you want to vote on it, or do you want to?
Withdraw the motion.
I will withdraw the motion.
Right?
That's just been moved and seconded, did you withdraw? I would just vote it down. And that means if.
Oh, table it. We're gonna bring this up.
Table it and
Bring it up
Right,
on the 11th.
right.
Okay.
We'll table it then.
All right, table. Do
Uh,
that properly.
Let's move to table.
Move to,
Tabling the motion that just says we vote on this.
move to table,
I'll second.
second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, it has been tabled.
Okay, now, the operating agreement between Jogga Fresh Farmers Market and South Russellville. Solicitor, you had a chance to look this over.
Yeah, I mean, this is the exact same agreement that we used previously, just with different dates. So this was presented, as I understand it, with the dates filled in from Jogga Fresh Farmers Market. The things that were missing were just a diagram and the certificate of insurance, which are referenced in the agreement, which we were able to get today from the president of Jogga
Okay.
Fresh Farmers Market.
I know there was a question about whether or not, concerning products that might be sold that perhaps we would not want to have sold. And I looked this agreement over and they really made a point to discuss local farmers and produce and added products
And some very specific stuff, so that we feel like we didn't really have to worry about what might be slipped in there.
right. And the fact that they do have a representative, this organization has a representative that has to be on the premises during those 3 hours, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Market manager.
Market manager. Now, we have had this market anywhere from 15 to 20 years, I understand.
Bill says 20.
20. Have we ever had a problem with goods that were being sold? Have we ever?
Not that I recall. I don't think so.
Okay. Well then, I'm making a motion that council votes and approves the operating agreement between Jogga Fresh Farmers Market and South Russell
For the year 2020.
for the year 2022.
And that the mayor be authorized to execute that agreement.
Precisely.
It's been moved, we have a
And I
second.
will second it.
Second, discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passed.
Okay, let's see, at this time I will yield to Council.
I can't remember if I was supposed to say anything, Jerry. I think we covered everything really well. The only thing I did learn from Mrs. Mushrush today, I see chickens out there. She lives out on Bell. I see chickens in an enclosed area, maybe 20 of them. They have 400 chickens. 400 chickens.
And not all of them are in that enclosed area.
That's all I have.
Been grabbed by the hawk.
Those are the ones that are roaming in the front yard, right across the road.
On the other side. On the other side.
Public Utilities Committee.
Why did they go there?
The Public Utilities Committee met March 18th. The minutes are in your packets. We discussed a large number of items. Of note, the project between ponds 3 and 4 in Country Estates area, Alderwood, is complete, subject to seeding and grass growing and spring things like that. So we will probably be taking it off our agenda. The project looks like it is complete, and of course in April, May, we'll find out if it's working the way it's supposed to. We also talked about the Parkland Dam petition, and the committee provided some comments earlier today to the solicitor with regard to that petition, specifically that we would like the thing to have language in the petition itself that says that the money paid by the homeowner is going to be non-refundable. So it's upfront, and you all know it. So when they sign that petition, having carefully read it, no doubt, they will see that, and they know the money is gone, even if the engineer's costs are less than the total amount given by the homeowner. So we're not gonna like be refunding $55 to 11 homeowners if the engineer's costs are lower than estimated. So that is what I think going forward we want to do with the petition. Does that sound right, Brandy?
It does. I think though that the bond council will want to draft that language into the petition, so I think there's just gotta be notice to the bond council, whether that,
Are you going to do that?
if you want me to, I can, or whatever works easiest, Danielle, if you want it. You tell me. Okay, cool.
I think that would be wise, yes. And as far as that, that's somewhat on track with regard to addressing the parking ban situation. We also talked about, among other things, the Paw Paw Lake situation with their silt pond. And it occurred to us, this led naturally into discussion of a special improvement district solely within the bounds of South Russell. And that it might be a useful thing to do to have a special improvement district for the purposes of assisting property owners, homeowners associations within the village with dredging concerns because it impacts water quality. And the engineer advises that there are grants out there to help with water quality in their municipality. So, we'll explore this further about how this can be done, how it should be done, and perhaps come up with a means to compute some formula to decide how important a particular pond is in terms of retention or detention, and that what the village might do to defray the costing part for such a project. This is on private property for almost all of these, except for the one the village is going to build on its own property. So this is a new area for us. But it occurred to us that perhaps the time has come to start doing these things because, as we see, when detention ponds and retention ponds fill up and they don't work the way they're supposed to, people downstream suffer from it. And this is a village-wide problem that impacts residents and their private property. But because it's a village-wide issue, we think a special improvement district might be the way to tackle it. We asked the engineer if it would be possible to come up with some kind of formula to figure out what the village might do for a particular pond, given its dimensions. Small pond, not as much; larger pond, retention pond, more stormwater. Maybe that's some way we want to go. I bring this up to council because we're not ready to make a proposal yet, because we have a lot of details we need to work out. But we're taking steps with the 319 Whitetail project, the central retention basin. Did I get that right? Central retention? Or detention?
Detention, CED.
CBD or CRD? Detention, we'll go with that. The central retention basin. But it seems like there are other things we need to do or should do going forward. So Chris and I will meet at our next public utilities meeting, which I'd like to hold April 22nd. And do that at 8 a.m. in Village Hall, if that doesn't conflict with any other meeting. And the engineer, mayor, and Chris, and anyone else interested can attend. April 22nd, 8 a.m. Village Hall.
Perfect. Appropriate.
Oh, perfect. And Danielle, can you put that on the schedule, and I'll send you an agenda.
And Chris, you have also a hand in finance. As you're investigating this particular SID, take a close look because, one of the illustrative examples that they used in the presentation, as I recall, almost talked about forming a SID just for that neighborhood. And that the individuals that lived in that neighborhood then assumed the costs of the project for that SID. And as a matter of fact, the question that came up was, say for instance, like the dam. You have 11 people, but under a SID, they could form a SID, but there could be 2 people or 4 people or 6 people that might say, I don't want to participate. So, there's some nuances that really have to be investigated, and it might not be just necessarily a general SID for water retention problems. So,
add that to the list.
And further, we also talked about the 319 grant and the retention basin. Van Kuren was doing the tree cutting before the bats arrived. They are supposed to finish that by Thursday. And I think they have done cutting. The next step will be the retrieving brush removal. So I imagine the folks in Whitetail and Manor will hear more going forward once the debris is removed. And then, of course, then starts actual project construction in April and May. But the engineer's estimate is that the central retention basin should be done by the end of July. It's slid from July 4th to the end of July, possibly early August. So we'll be keeping track of that as well. And lastly, the clean out of the Family Life Center, I guess that's a retention pond. We got a quote, council talked about this at the last meeting for $7,400. It is an issue because it's in Bainbridge and it's $7,400 and it's on private property and it's really something the Family Life Center should do. So the question for council is, if they're not going to do it, what do we do about this because it affects Chagrin Lakes? Well, maybe Bainbridge would be willing to do it for us. That'd be great, but they run into the same issue. It's their municipality, but it's private property. And it doesn't affect anybody in Bainbridge. So they have almost the reverse of ours.
When's the last time anyone talked to Family Life Center?
Tim called, I know the day after our meeting. Last time I spoke to him, he had not heard back, but that was 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Mr. Mayor,
Well, that same day, I called Larry Trace, who told us that it had been done, I forget now, I think it was 2015. He told us when and how much it cost him, and he did comment, the person that did it would love to have the job again. So Tim and I are going to visit the Family Life Center people and figure, start with, we want you to clean this out and go from there. Just to sit down and talk and see the whole power structure of that situation.
okay, all right, so before council makes a decision that South Russell is going to get involved in any way, shape, or form, that conversation needs to go forward to impress upon Family Life Center that it's their responsibility and they should take care of it.
And as a note on that, let's say they offer to split it. Let's say they say, oh, we're gonna do it, 2 weeks from now, and we're gonna pay the whole cost, and the mayor just gets up and leaves. And if they want to split it, okay, that'd be fine. Let's say they don't, and they say, well, we're not gonna do it, we don't have the money, whatever. What happens then?
Well, the question I have is, even if they say, let's split the cost, I don't know if that's a valid expenditure of public funds.
So can I ask, any chance anyone knows if Bainbridge has an easement on Federated Church's again, and I think it's Federated Church that actually is the title owner, correct? And Family Life Center it's actually, I thought it was actually the CLC that actually operates it, which is the coalition, or Community Life Coalition, right? So, and I mean, I'll just, but I think it's still the title owner is Federated Church, so I'm just wondering, is Larry Trace from Federated Church? Is that who you spoke with?
Yes.
Okay.
Larry's kind of like Mr. Everything. I will be with the CIC member tomorrow night. I'll ask her who owns it. Who's really the control of it?
Well, and again, I should, full disclosure, I will not be able to do an agreement between South Russell Village and the CLC. But if it is the Federated Church, then, there's no conflict. But I thought again, if they were the title owner and they leased it out, or they have a management agreement with the CLC.
I don't know, we'll find out.
Okay. But the reason I asked if Bainbridge had an easement, is there is some case law that, I'm just saying, if there's an easement on that property, then Bainbridge would be the one that would be the one putting it out or working it out with Federated Church. If there is no easement, then suppose we can talk about other things. It's kind of loose, but there is a nuisance statute. I don't know 100% all of the facts. I know that, as I understand it, that if it's not cleaned out, right, that the water completely flows over 306 and it goes directly down, I out of Sherbrooke, but I'm not sure, maybe it goes all over Sugar Lakes, I'm not sure. You know, again, we have a codified ordinance, but it literally mirrors the Ohio Revised Code as to the nuisance. The question is, you know, could we prove that it's a nuisance? That would be very expensive.
And solicitor, you're talking about that from the perspective of litigation.
Well, actually, it's a civil or criminal, and actually, if you ask the attorney general, you have actually the village solicitor bring it, the prosecuting attorney can bring it since it's in the county. But it's definitely an endeavor. And we would have to prove that this is in fact, you know, a nuisance, causing a nuisance. I don't know that, I don't have all the facts to say, yes, I think that's, go forward with that case.
Well, I've litigated water cases, water going from one property to another. And they tend to be on the expensive side because when you file the action, there's a filing fee, you have to file a complaint, there's discovery. You have to have an expert witness come in, you know, maybe the engineer can do it for us, perhaps, I suppose, maybe not. But it's a lengthy process. And at the end of it, maybe you get an order that says they clean out their property. And if they don't, in violation of that order, then you go back for contempt against the other side. Point is, the legal costs only go up. And at some point, very quickly, they exceed $7,400. So forcing the family life center might possibly be an option. Question is it worth it, money-wise?
Sometimes the flags, just, you know.
It's possible. I filed lawsuits, or threatened to file lawsuits, the other side rolls over and does what they're asked to do. But is that the way to bet? No.
Is there any benefit to the village, keeping an easement for the, I don't wanna open a can of worms, but I mean, that's sort of what I'm asking. The
Well,
cost
we do
to clean it, why
For
clean it
self-processing
without
it
having an
and
easement? Correct.
So give me a history lesson before this, we put this restrictor plate in. Is the water traveling across the road affecting 306?
Yes.
It's affecting the road of Sherbrooke?
Routinely.
Okay.
That's why they put it in.
And then we have people from Sherbrooke and Chagrin Lakes, 25 or 30 of them, showing up at a council meeting, wondering, demanding, what exactly we were going to do about this problem.
Was it flooding the properties as well?
No, it was putting muddy water into their lakes and making their lakes unswimmable, which they were not happy about.
These are privately owned lakes.
They are.
And privately owned.
The reason I asked is, I talked to the
Over a
solicitor.
public road.
The reason I asked is I talked to the solicitor beforehand. I have subordinate and professional life insurance, one of those things, so I might want to recuse myself from any conversation with this moving forward.
Okay. But what I'm getting at is litigation is not the preferred method here in my view. Cooperation may be. So let's wait for the mayor's report back on what his discussions were before we do anything drastic, one way or the other.
That seems fairly soon that they have cleaned it out, though. In 2015, am I wrong? It's only 7 years ago. And I don't know how long some of these ponds, that they've been longer, they've cleaned out. And that's surprising.
We'll find out. We'll try the friendly approach first.
It costs us nothing to try the friendly approach.
Be nice.
And they've been good neighbors too, and we have done to them. Perhaps there's value in preserving them. So, with that said, Mayor, that concludes the public utility committee report, subject to any comments that Chris may have.
I have a question for you. I don't know if this came from public utilities or not, but we received in our packet some kind of past report of the first energy in 2016 over in the Paw Lake area. And there was some past communications from Paw residents. Is that from your committee?
We talked about Paw, but we didn't reference that report. That came, I think, from the engineer.
The mayor.
Oh, from the mayor.
The man that was in charge of the project back in 2016, I asked him for all the information he had, and that's what he sent. We were concerned that if the 2016 Dominion project put a large amount of dirt into Pawpaw Lake, there would have been evidence of that through holes in the ground or whatnot, and never been evidence that the dirt was brought in to replace the dirt amended. And that's Dominion's opinion of that's what happened there.
Okay.
The upshot is the engineer concluded that it wasn't the fault of Dominion or the village that Pawpaw's silt pond silted up. The Pawpaw folks have a very different view of this. And I think there may be a way to work this out where everybody benefits. But they had their pond dredged not too long ago, and then it filled back up.
In 2015, and it was filled up with a new bit.
Which is the same
You
view.
know, work with 2016.
Right. The, when you talk about SIDS, one of the things to consider is most of the silt that's coming from Bainbridge down what's called Silver Creek and going into Buffalo. So that's, you know, if we ever get to that point, it's a SID. We'll be working with Bainbridge.
Mark, the engineer, you said, claimed it wasn't, well, concluded that it wasn't the fault of First Energy. Was that our engineer?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions of the Public Utilities Committee? All right, Mr. Berger, you have the ordinance and resolution, the second reading.
Second reading and consider adoption of an ordinance adding number 25 for full-time administrative assistant pay range ordinance and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Dennis, the next one.
What readings should I do away from readings?
Are we doing this,
Well,
the waiving of readings?
this is already the second reading. I
Yes.
think we didn't have the waiver because Mark was
wasn't here.
absent at the last meeting, and we needed the supermajority, and we didn't have that.
I'm happy to waive readings.
Fine.
We need a second.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay. Porter,
Aye.
Aye. Berger,
Aye.
Canton,
Aye.
Kavanaugh,
Aye.
Lizick,
Recused.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Porter,
Aye.
Aye. Berger,
Aye.
Canton,
Aye.
Kavanaugh,
Aye.
Lizick.
Recused.
Okay. Ordinance passed. Dennis.
Okay. I'd like to introduce and consider for adoption an ordinance amending the 2022 annual appropriations budget, increasing general fund salary and benefits, $16,700, street maintenance fund, $13,000, ARPA fund, $392,188, declaring an emergency and waive further reading.
I would like to add to that $5,800 for the cemetery nuts,
Please.
for the cemetery.
That's the street maintenance one?
That is cemetery fund.
So amended.
Been moved. We have a second.
Second.
Roll call.
Porter,
Aye.
Bell, Berger,
Aye.
Canton,
Aye.
Kavanaugh,
Aye.
Lizick.
Aye.
Move to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Porter,
Aye.
Bell,
Aye.
Berger,
Aye.
Canton,
Aye.
Kavanaugh,
Aye.
Lizick.
Aye.
Ordinance passed. We are at the bills list.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to ratify the bills of March 13th, 2022 in the amount of $81,258.93. So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
We need a roll call.
Roll call, please.
Porter,
Aye.
Bell,
Aye.
Berger,
Abstain.
Canton,
Abstain.
Kavanaugh,
Aye.
Lizick.
Aye.
Motion passed. No other.
You love it, Porter,
None.
Bell,
Yeah, briefly. When we met with the Whitetail Manor special meeting we had a few weeks ago, it was mentioned that earlier that week, there's been a planning commission meeting that had kind of laid out what the landscaping demands would be for the project. I kind of felt inadequately prepared for that, not knowing that planning commission meeting was met and the results of it. Is there a way to add to our council packets every month, the planning commission, board of zoning appeals, all the minutes and stuff as well? So we can be on top of everything going on?
good on you.
That's all I have.
One thing, the solution to that is for the council member from planning commission to attend the council meeting. And fill in his colleagues.
I know
Which
that.
I was unfortunately not able, well, fortunately for me, unable to do those.
This in general.
I think you still got a good idea, Chris.
I think it is too.
Burger?
Real quick, when we met as a finance committee, afterwards, when the minutes were typed up, we looked at the action items. And I got a color-coded list, showed to people, with action items for individuals on the committee. And it brought to mind the idea that while our meeting minutes for council are good, it might be helpful if, as part of those meeting minutes, there is an action item list separately that can be then, we can direct our efforts for each of the committees. So it was suggested, so I bring it up for your consideration. And that's all I have.
Can you, at your next committee meeting, maybe bring samples after you've done the minutes, say, hey, this is what we're gonna do in my minutes. Thanks.
Yeah.
I have none.
Kavanaugh?
Oh, yes, I went briefly, and I forgot the date, it was last week, to the HDAC meeting, the Health Department Advisory Committee meeting, and a person that had been serving, I believe, for 18 years, was not going to put back on a new person who has taken his place. Bill said there's going to be discussion about masks, that's pretty much what the issue was over. 5 people threw their hats in the ring to run for this board. So you have the board that sets policy, et cetera. And then you have the actual health department employees that work day to day. So one person was replaced on the board. It was interesting. I've been to these before, and it was very interesting. A lot of discussion about the elementary kids and masking and the school closings, things of that nature.
I was glad that you went instead of me.
I
Thank you.
found it very interesting.
Is that all you have?
Yes.
What do you want to?
Yeah, the only new other I have is to introduce the council and the mayor, solicit their opinions right now about whether there is a feeling that we need a strategic planning meeting. And if we'd like to have one, great. I would only like to, encourage that be scheduled before our budget meeting, because, the strategic planning might dictate, what we expend on the budget. So, with that, open the floor to discussion. If it's a bad idea, then we can just schedule our budgetary meeting, the first week of October. But, open the floor.
So looking at the council portal, whatever we call it, looks like 2015 might have been the last time, is that correct?
Yeah, in terms of a big strategic plan, we've talked about it for the past several years, with, a lot of regularity. In terms of a product, here's the strategic plan for the future of South Russell. We haven't had that product since that time. The issue is that oftentimes for the past couple of years, what we've called a strategic planning meeting is only look forward to that 1 year that we're facing. So, and really in terms of strategic planning, if that's the direction we want to go, I don't oppose that. I'm not looking for a 5-year plan right now, but maybe we take the baby steps now to think about going forward. Having that 5-year plan is not a bad program.
I'm not opposed to long-term planning and making your annual planning a little
Absolutely.
more focused and result.
And so, there could be discussion. There's a long road between now and October, but, I think we can have discussions as council as to what is it we want to bite off? What is it we want to tackle in terms of the strategic plan? What's that desired end state look like that we want South Russell Village to be, and then plan backwards from there, which will have everything that we should be addressing. Now, it's going to require maybe a little bit more engagement from department heads and others, committees, but it's not a bad way to go.
In the past, the village did bring in outside resources to facilitate that, with Raleigh Kent State. they can state for different things, so if that's something you want, we can explore that, what it would cost if you want more formalized plan.
When do we pick a date?
I think, we're doing the first week of October.
No, that's the budget.
Budget is first week of October.
First,
I mean,
it's like first
week of
Tuesday in
September, maybe.
September.
You know,
Like 5 o'clock on a, I don't know, Tuesday night.
but let's not do
Tuesday,
Saturday.
8 hours
No,
here at 5:30.
no.
I know the mayor proposed, that our budget meeting be on Saturday on the first of October, but we don't want to do Saturday.
That's, you're down with, Cleveland State on your course, right?
It's online.
Oh, so you haven't seen,
Why do we see it? It's a Zoom.
but you haven't seen anybody, they haven't done strategic planning for your course
We
yet?
did it last week.
Excellent.
Did you,
You're a
Well, and I mean, case in point, using that illustration, really viewing the mayor's report at the end of that program for him, there was nothing that really came out of that could be defined as a strategic plan. So, I question the value of that program to define our strategic planning process, and we might be better suited to engage those folks from Kent State or other places to.
what I'm saying is, you have contact, you had like one session, with
Yeah.
strategic planning. Same thing, we had one session, but some of the professors down there,
I can ask that.
we we'll check with each other on the professors.
So why don't we propose the third Tuesday in September as a potential date?
Well, Tuesdays, the first and third, are APR at 5:30, so we have to start.
Why don't we bring our calendar?
Wednesday, let's do the third Wednesday.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's a council meeting thrown in there
But not the
somewhere.
first Monday.
Great, the first
Yeah, that's
Monday,
Labor Day.
that's Labor Day.
Are the friends home or
What's the
away?
friends
Ask,
Let's let's do this.
Tell you what, I will circulate a date possible for this strategic planning.
super. So it sounds like the consensus is strategic planning might be a good thing to attack. So, thank you.
Yes, I will circulate a date.
No further new business.
That's
Motion to adjourn at 9:04 PM.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Solicitor, please don't leave.
I thought she was well.
Oh, okay. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Aaron.
Item 2140 there.
Sorry, Marty Mark.
Thank you.
Yes. April Fools.
Jerry,
Yes.
so I.
Put it officially, send it first out.
Jerry, did you say hello?
You want us to go right in?
So Anastasia, what's your background? Are you journalism maybe? No, I thought. Oh, you?
You
All day.
2020. You hardly look old.
How's that?
People do children.
Yeah, really.
Can you grab the microphone?
Other question.
Have a good one. Enjoy. Hopefully that wasn't too painful for you.
Bye, Dennis.
Take care.
But that's, so the ordinance for, I guess I would. Got it.
So we'll be in touch tomorrow.
Well, I'm gonna send out a reminder.
Let me get my card and I'll give you my cell phone number.
We'll see you, Chris.
I'm going back south. I'll be back in 2 weeks. No, I'm just kidding.
And I added it here.
How did the dogs take the trip, all right?
They loved it. Oh, they had a blast.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what we did. We did 2.5.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're down there in the high rent district.
But like I said, this Pennsylvania boy needs to see some valleys and some hills. It's too flat, too much traffic.
All right.
Okay.
Night all.
Bye-bye.
Good night, good night.
Good night. Should we kill the broadcast here?
I can't start dancing though, it's all.
Sure you can.
End stream?
Yes, please.
Go away,
I hope nobody's
Bar.
laughing.
Something.